My name is Ron Kenett. I'm with several hats. An academic hat in the university, from the University of Turin in Italy, and from the Hebrew University, the Institute of Drug Research, IDR, where lots of people are working on drug delivery systems. And I've created a company many years ago called KPA, and that's my second hat. So one hat is academic, the other hat is working with companies. We have a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, BTG, which is a ferrying company, Teva, Perrigo, Kamada. I can list several companies that have also hired us to push their QbD program and trying to figure out what it means. When I'm asked what is QbD, I refer to this wheel that Moheb Nasser, who is now working for JSK, proposed as you see 10 years ago. It's amazing, but this is... at that time, the focus was on two aspects, product understanding and process understanding. This was a mitigation to this fantastic 2004 document, September 2004, that the FDA came up with, Innovation versus Stagnation. I don't know if you've read that. It's a great document. It's the first time a regulatory agency states that they are part of the problem and the solution needs to be found. And this came up with these graphs that were mentioned here with rising costs and innovation being, very few new molecules come to the market now. That's why drug delivery is becoming so important. And so for statisticians, this was applied statisticians, this was an incredible opportunity because here's the regulator talking about a topic which involves interesting statistics, and we jumped in on this. We've run several international conferences in Israel on QbD, and I believe we were one of the first to add to these three aspects of product understanding and process understanding the aspect of clinical understanding that Andy talked about. In this context, there are two activities. One has to do with the design space, and two, with the control strategy. And actually, I think that when you talk about, when E6, when they talk about QbD in clinical, they talk about the control strategy, not so much the design, okay? I'll give you one example on design in this talk. There are more, there are actually more. And the path to a filing of a QbD dossier, which is now compulsory in generic. Anyone in generics here? That's a huge business, as you know. Starts with a target product profile, so you have to identify what it is that you want to achieve, figuring out the critical quality attributes. All this is supported by risk assessment that needs to be a live activity being reevaluated, not a one-shot deal. And all this offers really interesting opportunities. In the design space group of issues, FDA, the ICH guidelines talk about the multidimensional combination of product characteristics. When you talk about multidimensional aspects in the pharma industry, people have a difficult time because they are so much used to one dimension at a time. So that it's not just the tools, it's the approach. The issue of interactions, okay, one factor at a time is not going to provide information on interactions. And then you get to so-called regulatory relief, which means when you write to the FDA, you don't have to wait 6 months to get a response, because if you have established a design space, you just let them know that you've made a change and you don't need their approval, which is a real revolution. And you are obliged to share and visibility, and you have to be very open, and that's also obvious. Okay. So we have these ideas of knowledge space, design space, control space, where you have some freedom. These are really not new. There's an old paper by Box and Draper, 1959, where they talk about operability region and region of interest. So these ideas have been around, okay, but now they've been operationalized, and the ICH and FDA guidelines are actually making them very useful in industry. So what am I going to talk about? Okay, this was a preview. I'm going to talk about something we call the quality ladder, to put this in context. And then I'm going to have a discussion that is based on a QbD blog that we have that we run with JMP examples. The first one has to do with 7 responses, okay, multidimensional 7 responses, and how to set up a design space. Then we're going to discuss nonlinearities. We're going to discuss robustness, sensitivity. When I say we, it's because the blog has co-authors. So I am referring to them as well. David Steinberg is one of my co-authors in this. In the robustness, we are using a concept of stochastic emulator, and JMP provides a fantastic support for this idea. And hopefully you'll get motivated to look into this if you are not familiar with it. Mixture experiments, people who do formulation are familiar with that. I've also met people who are doing formulation who are not familiar with mixture experiments. So we'll go over this briefly. The idea of sequential experimentation, and another aspect which is really a very important aspect, which deals with split plot designs, something that is much more common than you would think. In retrospect, we see so many now I see split plot designs in almost any experiment that people do. They don't always tell you, but if you ask them, you figure out that that's what they've done. And in a layman language, it deals with how to change factors. Okay, so how do we deal with how to change factors? And the last piece will involve something that I've been working on in the last few years called information quality, in short, InfoQ. And this will wrap up the 35 minutes I have. So what is the quality ladder? The first chapter in the book that is here, there are two more copies. I'm supposed to hand them out if people ask questions. We started with 7. That's good. I was, Andy referred to Deming. Deming recommended that companies have a director of statistical methods reporting to the CEO. That was actually my job for about 8 years in a telecom company. And so I was supposed to push forward the use of statistical methods in this company. And when you are in this role, you figure out that, okay, it's not an academic environment. You deal with managers, and you need to do something that managers can digest. Okay, so that gets you to look at how these managers work. And some of them are firefighting, and if they're firefighting, they don't need data, right? Because they wait for the problem to come to their desk. So no proactive activity. They don't need any statistical process control. You know, the problems come in, and they have to be good at solving problems. Okay, they work late at night. They get phone calls at 12 o'clock because some of the bioreactors is not producing, and they have to do something. Okay. Then you have the inspection mode, where they're going to inspect everything. At some point, this is what people in pharma were telling us. You know, we cannot make any changes, any improvements. We filed the dossier, the SOPs are set, and the only thing we can do is inspection. And then you get into people who understand that things are process-related. Andy was mentioning that. And at the top of the ladder, you had these people who were willing to invest in quality, and we call this quality by design. Actually, long before the FDA used the term, there is a chapter on quality by design in this book. And that's the second edition. The first edition was 1998, just so that you... And if you have this map, okay, we're talking about maps. If you have this map of how managers work, then you know how to match what the statistical methods to this style, to the style of management. So if you talk about managers who have this insight that processes are important, you can start talking to them about statistical process control. Those who want to invest in quality, then experimental design is going to be very important. And the idea, if you want to play this role of director of statistical methods, is that your job is really to get the organization to move up the ladder. Okay, and this now, in the context of the pharma, I also heard people from EMEA, the Austrian person who was in charge of EMEA, I don't remember her name, she said, for the regulators, it's an even tougher challenge than for industry to go up the ladder. Okay, because the auditors who have been trained in inspection, now you want to get them to understand what the design space means, multivariate. Wow, that's a real challenge. This book has been translated in several languages. It's now in Vietnamese, and somehow people in Vietnam are interested by this. And as I mentioned, it has a chapter on quality by design. So that's the book has an introductory level chapter and a more advanced level. So we try and fit both levels. The blog, which is what I'm going to be talking about in this brief talk, that's the link, and it begins. The blogs begin with a story. They show how statistical methods can be applied and what are the insights, the conclusions that you can draw from applying the methods. So we're not just giving you the tools. We're giving you the story, the problem, the tools, and what it is that you can get out of it. Okay, that's the idea. The first blog is the introduction to QbD. The second blog is about setting up a design space. As I mentioned, 7 responses, 3 factors: temperature of reaction, blending time, and cooling time. This is the JMP file. As you can see, or some of you, there are 2 center points. And if you do this analysis on these 7 responses, and you look at the specification limits, as opposed to control limits that Andy was calling tolerance limits, and I'm sure it's not your it's not your fault, but these are control limits. What is mentioned as tolerance. Okay. You have a profiler. You can see that temperature on assay of this propyl paraben is going to have an effect, and also this active assay. So temperature, as you go up, is going to increase these responses. Blending time, on the other hand, seems to be inert in that it doesn't really affect what is going on. If you look at the design space. That's one way of representing it. It's actually a two-way projection, and there are actually issues with the fact that it's a two-way projection, but that's a discussion maybe we can have later. So what JMP gives you is an option to look at this design space through two-way projections. You see that if you increase temperature, these little dots here show you the direction up. You're going to go up. Blending time, on the other hand, you can go up, and nothing happens on these different responses. Here you have this sweet spot where all the specifications are met, and here is cooling time as opposed to blending time, and we now have this region where cooling and blending and temperature can be combined, and this is where you have the normal operating range. Okay, you'd really like it as wide as possible. So the fact that you don't have significant effects is actually very good, because it widens your space. You don't want significant effects. Okay, the second blog I will talk about is about a fractional factorial experiment. We are talking about nanosuspension formulation that improves bioavailability by increasing dissolution for drugs with poor solubility. So we have a process, there are larger particles, and there's milling, and eventually we're going to look at the properties of this formulation. There are two. It's a two-level fractional factorial. When we map the factors, we have different factors that are set at two levels, and then we're going to have 6 center points. And the story here, the peculiar part of it is that we have this stabilizer. Okay, so we have two types of stabilizers. So what is a center point? There are actually two types of center points. There are the 3 center points for stabilizer A and the 3 center points for stabilizer B. You don't find this in the textbooks usually. You have clean stories with center points. So now we have really two types of center points. And you can see these 3 center points are all centered on the other factors. And this is categorical. This is categorical. Okay, so here are the two types of center points. To assess nonlinearity, we added a center point variable, which I'm not showing it here, but you will see it in the blog if you're interested. On the in these center points I had before, this new variable has a value 1, and in the other it has a value 0. And that allows you to pick up nonlinearities, because you can then compare on the significance of this center point variable whether there's a difference between the grand average and what the model says. And the point is that you will know that something happens, but you don't know what happens. In definitive screening designs, you also get an indication if there is nonlinearity, what type of nonlinearity exists. So here we're going to have some diagnostics that some nonlinearity occurs. And here is the effect of this center point variable, 0 and 1. We can see on this 28 days mean, we can see that something happens. In other words, we have nonlinearity over time. So there's a trajectory aspect over time that needs to be considered. I'm going too fast? Yes? No? Okay. The blogs are short. If you read them carefully, without too much noise around you, you will get it. Okay, so they're really short. They are 1, 2, 3 pages, not more than that. So I'm just giving you teasers, hopefully to get you interested enough to spend 15 minutes on the blogs. Okay, and since there are now 9 blogs, and I don't have the time to cover all 9 blogs, my objective is to just get you interested. The fourth blog, the third in my talk, has to do with this idea of stochastic emulator. Okay, that's where I really would like to raise your interest. Okay, there's a very nice article that Ian is one of the authors called Monte Carlo Simulations Experiments for Engineering Optimization. And we had this article in 2006, we meaning Ron Bates, David, and Henry Wynn, which is titled Achieving Robust Design from Computer Simulations. That to me is a potential breakthrough in that with JMP we can use existing data. You know, when the domain experts come to you, they usually have some kind of Excel spreadsheet with some initial experiments that they've done. They might not have designed the experiments, but they've done something. And BH square, you know what BH square stands for? Box Hunter and Hunter, the blue book, or the depending if you have the first edition or second edition, the yellow one, the orange one. It is synthetic in spirit, in that what it says, the message is, you start from scratch. Okay, you bring in your intuition, your knowledge by affecting the factors that are used, the levels. Okay, but you don't bring in previous data. Okay, we are now 2016. BH square was 1978. Okay, so I think things have evolved, and thanks to software, we can do things that we couldn't do in 1978. And one of the things we can do is start with existing data. I understand JMP calls this data-driven experimental design. I really should learn more about what JMP is doing on this. And you start modeling, and then you augment the design and build your knowledge. So we go back to the original generic drug formulation that I mentioned. That was the second blog. There is a standard called SUPAC. You know about SUPAC, S-U-P-A-C? Okay, that's how you develop generic drugs, and you make sure they match the brand. Okay, and basically it gives you the guidelines. It gives you what it is that you should aim at so that you can claim bioavailability. So here we have also particle size that we didn't have before. And we start with some data. We build a model. If we did an experiment, okay, I'm going to have to go faster. Okay, I'm going to skip the demonstration. I won't have time for that. Okay, so we have a model. This was something that I thought was really cool that JMP had already, maybe version 10 or maybe before, version 9 or 8 maybe, where you can introduce uncertainty in the inputs. Okay, in this book we have a simulator. It's a piston simulator with uncertainty in the inputs. So what people used to do when they prepared simulators is add the random error at the end, right? Plus E something. Okay, what we did here is introduce randomness in the x's, like JMP allows us to do, and we can see how the variability is pushed to the outputs, and we get this failure rate based on 5,000 simulations. So we see that the in vitro upper is much higher than needed, and that's why we have 81% out of spec. It's more than 133%, which is what the SUPAC is indicating. So we can try to optimize on the desirability of these different responses. The other thing we can do, which is what I referred to before, the stochastic emulator approach, around the setup of the experimental factors, and you can control how far you want to go. Do you want to cover the whole space, or do you want to stay sort of in the 50% center? You can run space filling experiments. You can run a computer experiment, which is really picking up an emulator of the variability as reflected in JMP through defect rates. But actually, the real data that you get relates to variability. And JMP translates that to defect rates, to make it simple, I guess. But this is an idea that can be pushed further. And then you can optimize on defect rates. And the way you optimize on desirability is to set up the level that meets your goal. The way you optimize with this stochastic emulator is on reducing defect rates. And actually, in most cases that I've seen, the robust solution that optimizes on defect rate is you pay a little price on the desirability, but usually it's not a big one. So you are after a solution on a flat surface as opposed to a solution on a local peak. Okay, more in the blog. You can read it. The fifth blog is on mixture design and on the simplex representation. The classical papers and methods on mixture design, which refer to Chefet polynomials and all sorts of very complex things, again, if you understand the concept of profiler, gives you a profiler exactly like we had before. So it's really convenient that everything now is focused on providing this profiler. For managers, it's fantastic, because now they have a unified perspective on different types of experiments. And they have to know how to ask questions on the profiler. And that I think, is really an important aspect. The sixth blog is on a combination of Plackett-Berman and central composite design. Again, with the profiler, we see how learning takes place and how we optimize on this encapsulation efficacy, and we get an improvement. So that's another blog that talks about sequential experimentation. And here we come to the split plot experiment, where the example we are using is not dogs, but pigs, which take something, we call it antibiotics. It's not really antibiotics, but they take something. And on the back of the pig, you have 6 sites, okay? And you can play with what you do on these 6 sites in terms of the intensity of the treatment and the length of the treatment and the procedure, okay? What you cannot play with is the fact that if a pig takes this antibiotic, it's going to affect all 6 sites. Okay, so this is QbD in preclinical research. Okay, that's an example of what you were talking about in the context of designing an experiment. And now you have a choice on what to give what pig. So there is some randomization on that. And then you can play within so you have whole plots and split plots. And we've restricted maximum likelihood estimation, which is this proc mixed stuff that was mentioned. You can now do it in JMP. And people have shown this initially thought, no, it's not possible. With a $2,000 product, you cannot do that. I mean, it's out of the league of this type of products. Okay, so this is called how to change, because you now have 2 steps which really reflect 2 levels of randomization, and you have the option to do that. Okay, so in the 5 minutes left I have, which means I have 5 minutes, or? Yes? Okay. I want to talk about the most important topic that I'm now interested in, and that's what we call information quality. Okay, we dealt with this issue. Okay, we are statisticians. We do some data analysis. We are supposed to provide our customer with information. So here comes the question. How do you know if what you've done produces information of quality? Okay, we know how to measure things, right? How do we measure information quality? And we don't talk about data quality, which was the previous talk. We don't talk about statistical efficiency, the Pitman efficiency, the Fisher information. These are other aspects. We talk about information quality. When you have an expert who lives in his space and you talk to him, you're going to translate what he tells you into an analytic space, and you're going to apply your tools in the analytic space. So there is an issue of translation here. And now you're going to do something and you want to assess the quality of the information, and that immediately brings in the issue of goals. If you don't have a goal in mind, and here's a study, you don't know what's the quality of the information provided. So it brings an explicit statement of the goal of the study. And we did a deconstruction. It's called deconstruction. David Hand calls it deconstruction into 8 dimensions. And that's a fantastic checklist. I mean, this has been field tested. I can assure you, we've tried it many, many times. Many people have tried this. That really covers the issue. You want to know, given the goal, do you have the data at the right resolution? Okay, are you collecting oversampling or undersampling? Data resolution. Data structure. Okay, data integration. Now you have the textual information, then you have the lab information. How do you integrate them? Is the semantic information combined properly with the unstructured data with the structured data? And there are methods for doing that. And there are good ways of doing that, and there are bad ways. Actually, JMP with join allows you to do some of that. And that's a feature which I think is very important, to know how to use join. How many of you have used join? Okay, 20%. Yes. How many of you know what ETL stands for? ETL. Okay, now we are down to 5%. When I ask statisticians, usually it's one hand. ETL is extract, transform, and load. If you were a group of IT people or business school people, you would all raise your hands, because people are taught how to extract, transform, and load and combine data. And there are tools for that. Pentaho, there are many tools for that. Statisticians are not aware of them. And that's crazy, because statisticians combine data sources in 2016, and they need to know how to do it. If you do it in Excel, forget it. JMP with join gives you some features of that. And then once we have these 8 dimensions, we can score them. Actually, generalizability is a very important one. Generalizability, oh, stop. Stop means stop dead, or I have one more slide, I think. Ian here kindly, oh, yeah, we have a book coming out this month on this. And this idea of scoring the 8 dimensions is a JMP add-in you can get for free. And actually, Ian actually went beyond what we originally imagined by giving a range of value on the score. So you can have an evaluation which also represents some uncertainty in your scoring. And this is very close to the big data world, where people talk about 3 V's. Velocity, variety, and volume, sometimes 4, which is veracity. And actually, 5 of the InfoQ dimensions really cover that. So this is the last slide. Better design and better analysis leads to high information quality at lower cost. So the message is, the real thing is information quality. You know, your business is to drive the quality of the information that you provide. And there is a lot of opportunity in this area. You know, it's not been a research topic for statisticians. If you go to the statistical literature, technometrics, and others, this is not really discussed. Okay, thank you.